Welcome to Mavens of Data. This week we're speaking with Jordan Morrow, Senior Vice President of Data and AI Transformation at AgileOne. In this episode, Jordan shared a ton of actionable tips on how to become a more strategic, business-savvy data professional to help you in your data career. Hope you enjoy this episode. Thank you so much for joining me, Jordan.
Absolutely. For everyone, Kristen and I go way back. So this is like a reunion for us. So hopefully we can give you some information to help you out.
I'm sure you have great information to share. So for the people who are here who do not know you, can you give us a background on yourself? And then also, do you want to mention, because the topic is obviously 101 for data professionals, what sort of inspired you to write that book?
Yeah, so my background is I am a massive nerd through and through, right? I've been in the data space essentially my entire career, and my claim to fame is I help invent and pioneer the entire field of data literacy. And so that started all the way back in 2016. Now, data literacy hits the masses that are not data professionals, right? And in an organization of 10,000 people, 50 to a couple hundred might be data professionals by trade and title. So that means 9,800 or potentially even more are not. So that's that data literacy side. But this book is about the flip of the same coin, right? We need business people to understand data better. And the book is about helping data professionals find more success in business because the skills that data professionals are immense. And what we need them to do is to advance those skills with more of those personal skills, the interpersonal skills, so that all that great work they build doesn't go to waste. And so when you have the data literacy side combined with the business literacy side, you hope to drive more value throughout the projects that you're doing.
Yeah, no, it is immense. And I think too, as you know, throughout my 15 years in data, it's gotten like easier to work with data as time goes on. The packages have become more high level. We have more point and click tools. And so then the focus becomes even more on your business acumen and, you know, how you are relating to other people inside the office.
Absolutely. And to echo you there. And I think that's the key is, especially with the way AI is driving things now, is we need the ability to drive data and business projects to value. And if we don't know where the value is coming from, then it might be time to just kick a project to the side and say, before I continue on this, is there value that this ties to in the business? And if not, then I'm going to stop doing it. Because if we're not driving value for an organization, then number one, it can be reputationally damaging. If they're like, they keep giving me this and I'm not sure what I'm doing with it. But number two, on the flip side of that, how many of you on this call don't want more time in your hands to be able to do more things, right? We're all busy. So when we kind of get rid of the stuff that doesn't derive value and bring in value-added work, our life gets more enjoyable, that's for sure.
Yeah, no, and I think what that reputation damaging looks like too, right, is if you are on lower value projects and then at the end of the year, it comes around and it's time to do a review and it's, you know, what did you do? What did you bring to the business? And you're like, well, I did an amazing job delivering all of the things that my boss asked me for, but none of it really mattered in a way that the business cared about. Like now you've set yourself up for difficulties getting a good raise, difficulties getting a promotion, and it can be insidious. Sometimes you don't even realize it's happening. And then you wake up one day and you're like, crap, I've been working on this thing for 2 months. And I think only 2 people cared, you know?
Well, and it's in defense of data professionals, part of that is that the business side, when they don't have the background that a data professional does with data, they might not understand that what they're asking doesn't have value. So for me, as a data professional, I might ask why 30 times because I want to just understand, okay, you keep requesting things. I need you to tell me why you're requesting it and what value you think this is going to derive for someone. Because it's not just, I don't ever want the blame to only be on the business and I don't ever want the blame to only be on the data professional. It's how do we get these things to work together, kicking out of the way these horrible projects that aren't delivering value and just wasting a bunch of time and really getting down to narrowing our focus on different things.
Yeah, no, and I've seen that. And it requires intentional pushback because I've
Yes.
had people come to me and say, hey, we're launching this new product. We'd like to run a test and see what happens. And when I look at, the sample size, and it's going to take 6 months to reach statistical significance because the sample size is so low. If the sample size is that low, like, do we belong running this test? And it took me a long time to realize that as a data professional, I am actually the one who has to push back on that and say, hey, we have bigger initiatives, we have bigger things that we need to be working on, because we have competing priorities, right? The business is launching this thing.
Yeah.
There are people who are actively involved in that who do want this information and they do feel like it's valuable and it would be valuable to them. But in relation to all the other things that are going on, it's just not high value enough to prioritize it.
Well, and that's where create for yourself a prioritization matrix, right? And it's going to have 4 quadrants. You're going to have those that are low-hanging fruit, but high impact, low-hanging fruit, low impact, very difficult to put in place. Those should never be done. And then very difficult to put in place, but very high impact. And when you have that in front of you and you're able to balance it through all the work that is taking place, you can then put the onus on the business side to say, okay, we'll select these 2 and this one. We don't want to touch anything else. Because if it doesn't work out, you've documented that they're the ones who chose it, not you. Yes. And you've pushed against it and say, okay, this is the duration. Here's the roadmap. Here's the milestones. Here's what we need to do if we find that it's going a different direction. This gets that whole network really understanding the process around getting value from data.
Yeah. And so what are some of the biggest gaps that you've noticed between like the business professionals and the leaders?
It boils down for me. It's not that effective communication is probably the best way to say it, right? Because the business side will think it understands, or it will understand what it wants, and it'll communicate it to the data professional. The data professional will build exactly what they requested. And then the business side will say, this isn't what I need. But they built exactly what was communicated. So for me, it's like the quote that's, I believe, attributed to Einstein, and I'm going to mess it up a little bit. It says, if I had an hour to focus on a problem, I'll spend 55 minutes focusing on getting to the right problem to solve, and then there's 5 minutes to solve it. So for me, the gap is that communication, that upfront work that might take a little extra time, but it ensures that you're working on the right thing. And this includes the roadmaps you put into it, the milestones you put into it, the strategy around it, and then not setting it too firm in place that you can't be flexible. That would be a second gap right there. Is a lot of times when we put our stuff in place and we start working on a project, how often do we not stop the project when we realize it's not working, right? Yeah. There's a fear-based side of that, oh my gosh, this is what I was told to do. And if I don't do it, now there's an issue. I want you to push against that and say, no, I have learned this. And the faster we get to the table that something is not working, the better it is for data work in general.
Yep, 100%. And, I just saw this actually 2 weeks ago where somebody demoed something that they had done and it missed the mark in terms of what the business was actually asking for. But the business didn't realize that they were asking for the wrong thing because they're non-technical. And so, both sides really thought, the business thought they communicated, the people who were developing thought that they were doing a great job. And so then again, and it's tough because as we're talking and you hear this, I'm hearing like overhead, more people in the meeting, right? But at the same time, like, things do need to be iterative because that probably could have been caught like 2 weeks in if there had been a short little demo on what was going on.
And I will add that, yes, there might be some more meetings, but everyone on this call, put it on your shoulders to really effectively prep for that meeting, right? Meetings do not have to last an hour. In fact, if we can't get to the point within 10 to 15 minutes, it's probably not the most effective meeting, although there are some meetings. I was telling you, Krista, right before this call, I had an executive call. That's designed to go longer because it's updates and vision and things like that going on. But if you're working on a project, I might spend 30 minutes before the meeting really honing in. What questions do I want answered? Why do they need to be answered? I'm going to set the tone right at the beginning of the meeting with 2 to 3 minutes of this is what we're accomplishing. I want to be done in 20 minutes. Here's the 4 questions we have to answer. By doing that, you're setting a tone for much more effective work versus sitting in another hour-long meeting where you walk away and say, what in the world did we just accomplish? I'm all about having effective meetings, not busy meetings. Busyness does not mean effectiveness, and I hate that mentality.
Okay, and so those were practical steps, but when we're talking about aligning to business goals,
Yes.
what type of practical steps can people take over there to make sure that they're successful?
The number one thing to do as a data professional is understand that your data strategy is the business strategy. It is not different, right? So where I see companies mess up on this side, and probably data professionals too, is where they write this big data strategy. It's got buzzwords in it and this and that, and then no value is being derived. Where I come back to a very simplistic way of looking at a data and AI strategy. Let's talk about all of it here. And that is, what are the business's goals right now? And then when you break it down, if you're a data professional that supports 2 lines of business, what are the line of business's goals right now? When you understand what the line of business goal is, there's your data strategy. Then you take it upon yourself to network. And this is a very practical step. I want you networking more often with the business professionals. Do 15-minute coffee chats if you're in an office. Do 15-minute virtual chats and just ask questions. How's the work going? What projects are you focused on? Why are you focused on it? Because then you're eliminating ambiguity and you're boiling things down directly to the goals that the business is trying to accomplish. If you're doing work and you do not know how it ties to a business goal or objective, or you don't know what the business goals and objectives are, that's on your shoulders to learn them. So you can do that by networking with people. You can do that by studying like goal announcements, PowerPoints and presentations and town halls. Really start to understand the line of business goals. That's it. When you understand that really well, then you can go and be proactive of understanding what data is going to support that line of business goal. What data is going to support our 3-year plan. If we don't have it, you can get to work getting it. If we have it, it's not quality, you get to work cleaning it. If you're trying to figure out the analytics. So that to me is the practical step. I want you networking. I want you to study things. I want, yes, and I like Scott's comment. I have to say this, rearranging the deck chairs on the Titanic comes to mind. Productivity greater than activity. Yes, doing the right thing. I've got a book, it's sitting next to me called The Focus Project. I encourage everybody here to read it. It's by Eric Qualman, really about how do you focus in your work, your life, and what you're doing. But anyway, that would be a thing. Is I would, number 1, network. I would, number 2, really start to understand the goals and objectives that you need to be accomplishing to support the business goals and objectives. And number 3, I would sit down and evaluate all the work that you are currently doing and ensure that you can tie it back to those goals. And if you can't, I'm going to turn to that line of business and say, you have me doing this. Please show me how this ties to the goal. And if they can't do that, then the conversation becomes, okay, it's busy work. What can we do differently so that we're moving towards a goal?
I love that. And I've seen it too, especially when we talk about the business strategy and all the buzzwords that are in it. And I think part of the problem is that the business strategy, they have to present it up to the C-suite. So then all of a sudden it becomes a marketing document. It almost looks like something that you could put on the company website to talk about how we're doing AI, and much less about, the nitty gritty and how it's like truly going to impact the business, in a more technical way and what we need to be thinking about.
Yeah, it's one of those things where I don't think data professionals realize just how good at sales and marketing they need to do. I mean, that is a key skill because you have the skills from a data side, but we have to be able to communicate it out effectively so that the masses understand clearly what we're doing. And that doesn't mean having anything technical in there because the masses aren't going to understand that. Like you and I, Kristen, could chat all day about machine learning and AI and all this. 99% of people in the business side aren't going to understand what you and I are talking about at the level we would want to. So it's get good at salesmanship, get good at marketing, market your work, benefits, all of that.
Yeah, no, I'm so grateful that my first couple jobs were in marketing because I think that, even the ability to go out and start my own business later on is because of, in part, the marketing experience that I've gotten. And also, on your point about the language, like I just noticed this recently. I was talking to a friend and he had been doing a lot of reading about AI, and we were able to talk, and I was like, he's speaking my language. And so often, like it's just not the case that people speak this language, because it is completely different.
Yes.
And so that's one challenge. What are some of the other challenges that data professionals face when trying to work with business teams?
Well, this one, I'm going to kind of go to the flip of what you just said. You had someone who was learning the language of AI so they could speak to you. I do think data professionals, because it wasn't what they went to school for necessarily, struggle with business language. And that is a big obstacle, is when we don't understand cash flows and EBITDAs and revenues, expenses, and those sort of things, it can be harder for us to see where the direction needs to go, right? And it could be that we think a project of 6 months isn't bad, but we don't understand the business setting. And in 6 months, there's a whole new ERP system that's been implemented, and they're not going to care at all what we're working on. So I think one of that is a very big challenge, is put it on our own shoulders to learn business acumen, business conversation, business vocabulary, business dictionary, so that we understand when we're in a meeting, let's say with marketing, and we're looking at click-through rates and all these different terms that they're throwing out, we have it in our minds. This is how data supports that. If we're sitting in a finance meeting and they're talking cash flows and EBITDA and all these terms, it's like, do you have a background in that? I think I have a chapter of terminology in that book, because you don't need to go back to school and get a 4-year degree in business, but we do need to start thinking from a business perspective. That is a big challenge, I think, is like the same thing. If I go into a meeting and I start talking Markov chain analysis, the business is not going to understand it. Same thing if the business starts coming into a data meeting and starts talking EBITDA, the data people might not understand it. So we have to make that drive through effectively, as that terminology.
No, and I've seen that a bunch of times, right? When I started my first job, it was that, my parents were a firefighter and a stay-at-home mom, and I had no business experience. So there was just general, like, what is the appropriate way to email? What do I include? What do I not include? What does a typical business culture look like? What does a day look like, right? And then I've also worked in healthcare, the utilities, e-commerce, and finance. And every single time I hop industries, right, learning about EBITDA, learning about, there's a million acronyms. And some of them, even if you're in the same industry, you go to another company in the same industry and they have their own acronyms, and you have to learn those. You have to learn what's important to that. Is it subscription? Is it one-time purchases? And there's different behaviors for all of those.
Well, and I'm going to add, someone put in there, domain knowledge matters too. Absolutely. When you combine domain knowledge, to your point, Christy, you could go from one company to another. The foundational domain knowledge will remain pretty settled and pretty much the same, but the vernacular people use could vary greatly. I've got 2 clients, same type of thing, they use different terms. And so if I'm building predictive modeling and AI for one client, I better word it this way. And if I'm doing it from this client, and so, yes, it is get that foundational knowledge universal and then expand out into other areas.
Yeah, no, and just be aware of it. One of the things I always think of is the word segmentation. And to some people, that means I'm going to define segments. It's going to be new versus returning, and then, some other thing, and we're going to break it up and we're going to look at those populations. To me, that means unsupervised cluster analysis. And then, so it's like figuring out, what do we mean by that word? And then if we decide we're going the cluster analysis route, how do I explain that to people in terms that they're going to understand? Because there is ways, it is friendly, and we can get buy-in for this project, but we just need to be careful with how we approach it, right? Because all of this stuff can get misunderstood. And even when we're in meetings, this stuff can get misunderstood. So how do you handle situations where sometimes insights are misunderstood or ignored by leadership?
I think this really boils down to communication, and it's really helping. So if I'm a data professional and I'm building something for my audience, I can prevent some of the holdups by getting to know that audience before I'm presenting it. So the moment that they receive the insight, they've already got trust in me. I'm working on that trust consistently. So, and I'm going to tie this to one of the questions in the Q&A if I could. And Miles says, do you think it's easier or more difficult going from business sales to data analysis or vice versa? Now, I don't know if there's a black and white answer to this because it depends on the person. But I find teaching people 1 + 1 = 2, i.e. analytics, is going to be easier than teaching good communication. They call those skills the soft skills. I actually find them to be the harder skills for people to learn is the networking, the salesmanship, the buy-in, and things like that. Because I could teach someone the syntax of SQL or Python. This is what you do. I can teach you principles of A/B testing and Markov chain analysis. Where it really gets into this, and tying back to your question here, is when I'm trying to overcome obstacles. The way I'm able to do that is data does not change a person's mind. I think data professionals don't like hearing that. There's a great book out there called How Minds Change. Minds don't change because of data points. They change because of narrative. And how do we craft good narrative with data? Now, we need good data to support the narrative is by getting to know our audience so that we know this executive has holdups with data in this area. So I need to create a narrative around this. Marketing really loves data in this area, but they're questioning this. I'm working on my narrative here. So we've got to remember that we need quality data, good analysis, and that stuff matters. But what matters more is the people side of this. And how do we get them influenced? How do we create narratives with those data points that effectively change minds? And that helps to overcome it. But I would say that is harder than teaching syntax in coding.
100%, because there's more subtleties, things
Yes.
that are, black and white. It's very easy to give that. But when there's just so many subtleties, and your term about the narrative, it makes me think of it was Seth. Oh, I feel like I'm going to end up naming a famous actor other than the person who is actually credited with saying this.
Just only say it's this person.
But it was, a statistical analysis and an anecdote walk into a bar, and the statistical analysis sits in the corner and the anecdote talks to people at the bar and shares stories. Yeah. And then in the end, it was that nobody knew or remembered the statistical analysis because the story matters.
Yeah. Well, and I don't want to talk about politics, but if you don't believe this, every side of the political aisle is about narrative and the misuse of data. And it's this idea of they find data points that tie to a narrative and they misuse them. We can see that across political spectrums. It's not one side or the other, it's all of them. And it's the similar thing, like people fear hallucination with AI. And I'm like, do you know what hallucinates with data more than AI does? People. So don't get over the hallucination. It's because it's a machine, they can attack it. That's a narrative. The data point is that AI is better at being clean than humans are, but with data. But the narrative is that's a machine, I can attack it. I don't want to attack people. And so that's why 80 to 90% of data work is people focused, and really honing in those skills. Man, does that help you succeed as a data professional?
Yeah. And so do you have tips for actually explaining complex data concepts to leadership?
Yeah, I mean, we can study the term data storytelling all we want, right? So tip number one is get to know your audience. I mean, I hate to say, I don't want to be a repeat on that, but it's going to may come up even more. But when we get to know our audience, that's not just getting to know what is their job role. It's getting to know their personality. When we know their personality, I'm a huge rugby guy. I'm wearing a University of Utah rugby shirt. It's where I coach, one of the teams I coach, right? When we know that, if I know a person's personality, guess what? I can tie personal examples with the data to hobbies that person has. So if it's a rugby guy, I can use rugby analogies and all of that. And Scott mentioned someone in here I was going to mention, which is Brent Dykes, right? Yeah. Go get the book, Effective Data Storytelling, and read the book, How Minds Change. The tip to really first get to know people means you're building work according to them. Number two, we're going to go back to domain knowledge. The stronger your ability with domain knowledge and data knowledge that is supporting that domain, when that audience comes back to you with hurdles, you have ready answers for them because you have studied and you know it inside and out, right? It's when we're data professionals, I think sometimes we think our job is just build the data, build the data, build the data. It's not. It is really becoming experts in the data. experts in the domain that we are supporting so that when questions come, we can do this. Now, number 3, what do people always want to know? What's in it for me, right? If you want to help people understand and get the narrative right, when you're showing them data, we have to make sure that they understand the benefit to them. And then final tip I'll give in this one is sometimes the data does not paint a pretty picture. We know that. That's okay. Where I think people lack is they don't have a solution behind it. So if the data is saying things went negative and went south by X amount, the next thing a data professional should say is, but if we do this, the numbers can go better. So that is having the negative story with a positive solution on the back end so that we keep testing and testing and testing. And over time, we've iterated to the point that we are successful. But this is something that could be very hard for data professionals in the culture you work in, is people have a fear of retribution if the data doesn't come out the way they want. Well, what if they've never had the data? It's all about how we communicate that. If they've never had the data, of course, I'm not going to hold people accountable. They've never had it. Now we do. What are we doing about it?
Yep. And that was so important that you talked about giving the outcome when it's like the negative data and then saying what you could do to fix it, or even if it seems incredibly obvious. Like sometimes we will find things and it's like you look at a chart and the thing is so obvious and you're like, I don't need to write it down because they're going to look at it, but you do need to write it down. And sometimes that's simply because if somebody else looks at that chart and they make the statement that this is the insight, now they get credit for that insight, and you did all the work. And I hate to say it like that because it just seems it seems a little petty, but like you have to get credit for your ideas, for the things that you found, and you do that by actually writing it on the slide.
Well, and we don't sit back and think people are going to recognize your work. Please don't.
That too.
I mean, you're really good at data and statistics, and I do not like selling myself, but I need to do it more. And so put notes down, like Kristen just said, put the actual thing down. Here's the outcome. Here's the decision. Here's this, here's that. So it's documenting your work and your value versus just because the data is good and the analysis is good does not mean you're going to get credit for it unless you are putting that foot forward.
Yeah. And I do want to talk about like the very first time that I felt like getting buy-in on a project was successful for me, because I had people, we were going to do, again, back to, behavioral segmentation using cluster analysis, and people didn't know, what that meant. And so I got to talk about sort of very simply just, that the clusters are going to take the things that are more close to this center and the things that are further away might be closer to another cluster. And then I went on tour and I started using this term after I went on tour and found that it works. But I sat down with marketing, I sat down with finance, I sat down with operations, and it was the same presentation. And I wasn't used to giving the same presentation to everybody else. I thought that, every time I presented, it had to be new, but these people hadn't seen it yet. And I actually went and spoke to all the different departments, and I was able to get buy-in on the project. And it was, I had been working now for a couple years, and it was actually the first time that I felt like it had gone smooth. I met with my stakeholders. I explained how, what I was actually going to be able to deliver, what that was going to look like, what went into it, and, what they could expect. And then they were on board. And that was just, it was new to me at the time.
Well, and you're talking about what we described earlier. It's putting forward effort up front for the long-term benefit.
Yep.
Just the other day, a prime example in my life is we were going to help my dad in his yard. And the route we would normally take was just so congested, I actually drove backwards to go forwards. And sometimes when we sit and think about our data work, it might feel like we have to go backwards to train people up. But in the long term, is that going to be better for you than first is just keep pushing through? Because if we just keep pushing through, it could be like hitting up against the wall over and over, and we're just frustrated. Well, don't be frustrated. Frustration can be derived because of high expectations we put out there, but are those expectations valid? And so we have to be able to say, okay, what can I take on as a data professional? What is the onus I need to adopt so that the audience I'm working with is prepared? If it means a month roadshow, virtual meetings, then that's what it means. But I want to bring something out here. I'm a very social person, but I'm introverted, right? At the end of the day, if I'm at a conference, I go to my hotel room and I rest because my energy is spent. So always networking, always talking is not my comfort zone, even though it seems like it. People, I think, get shocked when they find out I'm an introvert. But what I would say is sometimes we have to do the things we're not comfortable with to get the outcomes we want. And if you're not comfortable networking, just do it. And at the end, but reward yourself. So again, I've spoken with Kristen at events, right? The end of the day, I'm chilling in my hotel, maybe getting my favorite food, watching a sporting event, a movie. I'm rewarding the effort I had in that day by relaxing and unwinding because that's where my energy is. So if there are things on the business personal side that are not your comfort zone, push through it. Just make sure. Maybe you have a favorite latte you like. You get that the next morning. Maybe you start the day with that. But do something that rewards you so that it becomes more habitual going forward.
I love that. No, and I only realized it like I think a year ago that I seem like such an extrovert, but I am an introvert that is like really outgoing and chatty.
if you and I, like, honestly, you and I have been at big events before together. I don't know if anyone would describe you and I as introverted.
No.
We're not quiet. We have a blast. We joke around. You did the splits for a picture, right? I mean, we goof around, but that doesn't mean what to me introvert means is my energy gets spent.
Energy goes.
Yeah. And so it's finding all this balance of not burning out, because that is a huge key, delivering value and making sure I'm taking care of me so that I can take care of things around me.
Yep. 100%. And do you have any examples where communication really turned a project around or made a project a success?
Yeah, I would say in my current role right now, I'm Senior Vice President of Data and AI Transformation, but our parent company didn't have an AI guy. So I'm also essentially the AI guy at the parent company. But the key for me is when I started in my role, I went at the literacy level of the organization. And then, of course, you're building all the projects and all this. And that built a credibility, I think, with me. And so to your point, that communication leads to buy-in, and it leads to the leaders saying, hey, Jordan, what do you think about this? Hey, Jordan, what do you think about that? Versus they don't hesitate to come talk to me. And so I think it was, I keep coming back to it, that early work that prepared people better for the outcomes we are now delivering. They have a stronger understanding. They have a stronger background in it, so that and I'm very personable to everyone. I'm an open book, right? It's if you need, I have a call not long after our meeting. I was invited into a meeting the other day. As the AI person, the person just wanted to introduce me there. I do a lot of work with this person. And I offered up something like, hey, if you need to meet on AI, just let me know. I have a meeting here in just a bit, meeting with a person just to talk generative AI. How do we prompt better? How do we evaluate the responses? It's because I put myself out there to do that. So the trust level is massive. So when I start talking about things, that's already been built, and it makes my life so much easier.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. And so we are getting close to the point where we need to go over and do Q&A, which is super exciting. But if listeners want to learn more about your book or connect with you, where's the best place for that?
LinkedIn, by far. I'm an open book. Connect with me. You can ask me questions on there. I'll give you my email, and we can even set up 30-minute conversations. So any topic that we've talked about today that you want to dig in more, questions aren't answered, please reach out to me, connect with me. Now for my books, I've actually got 4. In fact, someone in the Q&A asked, where do I start? I would start with Be Data Literate, the 2nd edition. And because of that, I've also got, thank you. You also put the children's book in there. So you can find all my books on Amazon. I've got the Be Data series, Be Data Literate, Be Data Driven, Be Data Analytical. I got Business 101 for the data professional, a children's book, and I'm writing my 5th book right now. So if you're looking for who my publisher is, it's Kogan, Kogan, Kogan Publishing. And you can get them on Amazon. You can get them from Kogan. But the easiest way to get in touch with me is LinkedIn. I think that's how you and I met and have become friends.
Absolutely.
And if you use LinkedIn correctly, you build great friendships, great networks. I mean, you and I have been able to mentor each other, bounce ideas off each other. That's friendship. That's what you should be using.
Yes, 100%. All right, diving into Q&A. Gilbert has asked, how can data professionals be unbiased when presenting the narrative?
So this is a big one because I actually would probably find business professionals use bias more often than data. And that's more from the standpoint of data professionals are more trained to find bias. There's a couple things that I recommend you do. Number one is give yourself a gut check and leave your emotions at the door, right? You can have excitement on projects and things like that, but the moment we let that excitement creep in too much, it can construe the data analysis we're trying to do. So number one, leave emotions at the door. Number two, find yourself an accountability partner that you can turn to. I just talked about Kristen and I can turn to her at any point and say, will you give me a gut check? Does this look okay? Yep. She has then every right in the world to turn to me and say, Jordan, you look stupid right now. This is awful. I don't think she'd ever do that. She would be nicer than that.
I'd be kinder.
She'd be kinder. Maybe not. If it was totally out there, I hope you would call me out. But I have accountability people and friends that at any point in my analysis, I could turn to them. Find those in your organization. Find leaders. Find people in different departments so that you're not doing the same thing and say, I've built this analysis. I can't just tell. How does it look? Take 15 minutes, read through it, and they might say, you know what, this seems a little off, but this part looks really good. And then you're working together as a group, as a culture, trying to find the best answer versus trying to find answers that suit what you want.
I love that. Right? Like, ask your boss even for help if it's going to another department, because I think that there's often this idea that like, I don't want my boss to look over it because I want ownership. I want to feel like, you know, I can work independently. But at the same time, you may get feedback that will help you improve, do better, and, you know, kick butt in the meeting that actually matters. We don't want to shoot ourselves in the foot.
If you work for a leader, by the way, and I'm going to go at this hard. If you work for a leader who's taking credit for your work, might be time to move on. I'm going to be blunt. It's a good, you'll know a good leader when you have a good leader. And that good leader is giving you all the credit in the world and taking as little as possible. And when bad things happen, they take all the blame in the world and not passing it on. Accountability matters. And if you have a leader that does not have that, granted, it's kind of a hard job market right now, but it doesn't mean you can't be looking.
Yep, 100%. Okay, what advice would you give to your younger self when you were just starting out in the data world? I'm currently struggling to balance job hunting, learning new tools, and working on projects. I'd really appreciate any guidance you could offer to help me navigate this phase.
I think, and yes, this will tie to the younger and younger self entering the world, but I think it ties to someone who's been in the field for 30 years. Do not ever sell yourself short would be number one, right? The moment we say, I'm just starting off, I don't have that skill, this or that, we are painting a negative picture around ourselves that we shouldn't. Doesn't matter if you're just starting off or been 30 years in the industry. You have expertise, you have experience, you have ideas, you have creativity, and I want you to harness those and use those. But what the big key if I gave myself more advice when I was younger, it would be learning how to prioritize and focus better. I'm going to pull the book up. This book is a gold mine. It's called The Focus Project. Highly recommend it, right? I quoted it the other day. In fact, Eric connected with me on LinkedIn. I was like, sweet. But you've got to learn early on. There's going to be so many things that excite you, and they should. I want you to be exploring so many different things. That's a beautiful part about being a data professional. Data is data. They use data in healthcare, finance, marketing, retail. So exploring things, testing new tools, everything like that, do it. But the problem is we get overwhelmed. If we try and do that too much, it's like it's being good at a lot of things, master of none. And so what we want to do is really schedule our time, not time management. I want you to call it energy management, because time management, we could put 10 hours worth of work on our calendar, but we're burning the candle so much we're burning out. So for my younger self, starting in the data world, I would say, number one, I'm not going to sell myself short. Number two, I'm really going to learn how to prioritize and focus strongly. And then number three, I'm going to remember that the human side of this matters more than anything. My creativity, my ability to critically think, my curiosity, those are my 3 C's of data literacy. Those things mattered more than did I learn how to SQL today, or did I learn Python code today, or what's the latest AI tool. We're all naturally data professionals, right? We use our weather app to check out the weather and make weather-driven decisions, right? That's a data-driven decision. So never forget that you're already there. You're already good, but learn to focus, learn to prioritize, and never sell yourself short on things.
I love that. And I think if I was looking for a job right now, my focus would be on improving my interviewing skills. And it is so incredibly cliche, but I started working in 2010. And then in 2017, I had made a couple hops by then, but in 2017, I got laid off. And part of that was they paid for me to have a career coach. And I learned I had somebody handhold me through fixing my resume, how to write a cover letter, answering behavioral questions. And I had like numerous offers that I would not have gotten prior to focusing on those things. And, you know, had I incrementally improved my SQL skills by 3%, would not have mattered. My ability to talk to people in that interview and sell myself. And really, too, I learned about like some boundaries that I should have for, you know, I've been lowballed with offers. And not given things that I've asked for. And I've had to ask myself, you know, like, is this okay? And just sort of like learning where those boundaries can be and getting good at interviewing was, you know, just so transformational for my career. And I wish I had it prior to 2017.
Well, and that's, you know, if I were to tell my younger self, I would say I'm not afraid to invest in myself, right? If there's a course that's out there, you know, we get so hesitant to spend $2,000 to certify over a 3-month course. Don't hesitate, right? The more we can learn, the better we get. And then number 2, for my younger self, I would seek out and find powerful, good mentors. You have them in your career, but I'm literally meaning I mentor multiple people right now because I offer it out to people and they took the opportunity to say, Jordan, I want to take you up on that. That offers to anyone watching this. You find the right mentors in your younger career so that you just have someone on your back shoulder that's like, you have my support, plus let's help you get where you want to be.
I love that. Switching it up a bit. What are the key points to evaluate the data maturity level in a company? And I love this question.
So it's going to vary company to company, but I'm going to give a little tip on doing this really well. Use generative AI to create ideas around good data maturity. I think there have been things put out in the past that have been more like a one size fits all for data maturity. You have to have this, you have to have that. Organizations, just like humans, data literacy is not one size fits all. Data maturity is not one size fits all. It can have a skeleton outline that's universal, but I'm going to I love using Gemini Deep Research, right? A very powerful AI model, and it takes 5 to 15 minutes to run. It's not like those quick ones, right? I might go into it and say, I'm advising this company that works in this industry. I've evaluated and done an assessment on where they are with data. Write me a maturity model for this company. Then I'm going to personalize it myself. And so there's not a blanket answer here. What I would say matters greatest with data maturity is getting to know the organization, finding pain points in the organization, and then building a systematic, structured roadmap to get to where the organization wants to be. So the reason I say systematic, structured roadmap is the greater the structure around a strategy, the easier it is to accomplish. So if we're thinking about data maturity, I find a lot of organizations are going to get caught up in what we can call New Year's resolution syndrome, where they get all these great ideas around data maturity and nothing really changes. It's not because they didn't truly want to improve. It's because they didn't put good structure around it. Same thing with New Year's resolution. How many people set a New Year's resolution and say to themselves, I hope I fail this? No, I think they're excited and gung-ho and they want to do it, but they don't make the necessary changes. They don't adjust their environment. They don't put milestones in place, and they don't reward themselves with those milestones. So what I would say to this question is there isn't going to be a general answer. I'm going to use generative AI to help give me ideas that then I can start to test and implement. I'm going to assess the company, but that's how I would go about it to create key points to help me understand, whether it's my own organization or others, what does data maturity look like and how do I achieve it?
Yeah. And I think so when I first read this, I was thinking of it more from like an interviewing perspective, like because I wrote a blog article that was, hey, because in my first couple jobs, when I went into an interview, I was just looking to answer whatever they asked because, I was hard up for a job. But when I got to a position where it was like, no, I really have, I want to be working in a place where I can pull data, where they have lots of attributes, where I can build interesting models. And I started thinking more about like, what do I need to ask a company to understand if they're going to be giving me, Excel files, CSVs that I'm pulling into Python, or am I going to be, working with something that's like robust and built out? And so the questions aren't perfect, but it was me just trying to get at the idea of, hey, like, am I expecting that, this is going to be a more tech savvy company, or am I going to be getting into something that maybe it wasn't going to be for me at the time? And so on my blog, Data Moves Me, I think it's just like, interview questions to ask for evaluating tech, the data maturity or whatever. So
everybody go read that. Because I fell victim to my own mistake once in taking a job. And I think it was the excitement to lead a data organization at this company. And the problem was I did not ask the appropriate questions on where was leaders' maturity with data. Did they understand the investment it would take? Did they understand what this really involved? Do they understand I'm going to need data engineers and analysts and be able to use data science? That was on my shoulders. And at one point, I couldn't get out of that company fast enough because I was not set up. I was not set up to succeed. And I don't necessarily put that on them. I should have brought that up in the interview process. And when I find out that they're not there, it would be on my shoulders to either say, all right, let me see if I can get them there, or nope, I'm not even going to touch this, because that was on me. That was absolutely my problem.
Yep. All right. So this is another question. At the final decision, after showing the analysis to the CEO or executives, for example, is it our responsibility as data professionals to make the final decision?
I would say no. I would say the final decision is going to be by the C-suite. I would say you should take on the responsibility of providing potential solutions, right? When we look at data analysis, sometimes it's going to be black and white. There's only one solution. Sometimes there's going to be multiple options. As I'm communicating the narrative and the data story as a data professional, if I'm going, like for my company, for example, if I go to the president, who's my boss, and I say, here's 3 potential solutions to the problem we're doing, and they might come to me and say, which do you recommend? Be prepared to be able to answer that question, but I'm going to put it on them because they are running the business. I will offer my ideas and things like that, but we're going to put the onus on them because that is their responsibility. Your responsibility is to provide the analysis, the insight, the information, potential solutions. You could put a recommended solution plus 3 alternatives. That's all great and fine. But if the business is asking you for this analysis, that is their responsibility. And your responsibility is to bring them all the information. And if they don't go the way you think they should, don't get frustrated, right? That is not your responsibility either. You can be mad. Like I've got a tattoo on my arm. It's the analogy of the 2 arrows. The first arrow is the pain. The second arrow is your suffering. Suffering is your choice. Pain is not necessarily. So if they don't go with your choice, just move on and say, you know what? I'm now going to build data that either shows that choice was good or that choice was bad, because that's what you do. You make a decision, you gather new data, get a decision, new data. But that is your responsibility, not necessarily to make the final decision.
Yep. I always make the recommendations, and there might also be a slide of next steps that is like, hey, we need this additional increment to like fully validate this or further validate this or feel a little bit better, which they may or may not decide to go with too. But yeah, I've also definitely had recommendations not go my way that I had.
Oh, absolutely. And you just have to take a deep breath and be like, that's okay. Because your job is the analysis and the insight, understanding how it applies to the business. But in the end, that's what a CEO is paid for, is they are there to make the big decisions the company needs. And if they don't take your recommendation, it could be that they have information you don't, they just can't share it. So provide it, move on.
Yeah. At the end of the day, right, analytics is a support function.
Exactly.
And we are supporting marketing. We're supporting finance. We're supporting these other organizations, and they own the decision rights. And then when it comes to something like hypothesis testing, we're going to own the design of that because we're the ones who understand how to design hypothesis tests. But it's going to be in support of something else where somebody else will be making a decision.
Absolutely, unequivocally.
Mm-hmm. I'm interested in starting in the data world. Which books or guidance could you recommend us in order to set up an effective roadmap? For example, in order to automate a process, etc. And then, do you select the right tool to complete the request?
So the first book I would recommend, and this isn't because it's my book, but I would, if you're just starting in the data world, is Be Data Literate, second edition, because I added AI into that. The second book I would recommend is an AI book, actually, which is Co-Intelligence by Ethan Mollick, who's an associate professor. Those would be where I would start. Now, the big key for me is always start off with your objective. What do I want to learn or do? So when you're saying, how do you do a roadmap? Always start with an objective, then start with your strategy. Number 3 is what tools will get you there.
Awesome. How do you see AI changing the landscape of data literacy, helping or hindering?
Helping by far, because I use it as a learning platform too. Like you use it for different things. But I do remember when generative AI first came out, it was a friend of Kristen and I was like, am I obsolete? And our friend Christina Stathopoulos said, no, you just became more important, because the principles of data literacy directly apply to AI literacy. And for the majority of people, the use of AI is going to be generative AI. Now, the definition of data literacy is the ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with data. Transfer that to AI. It's the ability to read, work with, analyze, and communicate with AI. Didn't change. But what it can do is it now does things that we don't necessarily have to develop the skills for anymore. And that's power. So what I would do is I would really learn how to prompt it effectively, to get information from it, to evaluate it, and then learn how to make decisions with it. But I think it helps by a lot the world of data literacy, because now what could take a long time to do, you could do faster, as long as we don't forget the human element with it.
All right. And I think we have time for just one more.
Yep.
If the audience is a mix of both technical and non-technical people, then how are you thinking about the technical level of that presentation?
I'm going to the non-technical. That's the benchmark. And the reason for that is the technical will understand the non-technical, but the non-technical will not understand the technical. Now, a caveat to that would be, even though I'm going to build at the non-technical level, I'm going to let the technical people know they can meet with me offline to talk about the ins and outs of the analysis we did or whatever. So I'm opening up the door for those who might be more technical than the presentation is to meet with me to say, oh, that's great. I'm going to set up 30 minutes, 15 minutes. I would love to see what analysis you use. What stats did you use? What did you do here? I would love to learn to apply those. But if I present on all of that, the non-technical are going to be lost. So that is the key is I'm going to look, and I hate to say it this way because it doesn't mean it's a lowest common denominator, but that's what I mean is, depending on my audience and how effective I am at presenting, I want the vast amount of people, or the most I can get to understand it. And then for those that want more information, I'm an open book. Just come talk to me and we can sit down and get through it. And I know we don't have time for more questions. Everyone I didn't get to, please shoot me on LinkedIn. I can give you a message that way.
I love that so much. And also, so I just wanted to talk about when I make presentations to non-technical people, there's like very concrete things that I do not include. So that includes coefficients, p-values, correlations, anything like that I do not include. But it's not that I'm not sharing that information. It's that I am synthesizing that information and I'm sharing it in Word. Because I have seen huge matrices of correlations put on decks. And really what you need to do is take the ones that you care about and say, there is a, real strong looking relationship between these things. We haven't shown causation. That means that we would need to test to prove causation. I do not write, like if it's model output, you can use Lime or SHAP to look at individual customers, the model, this person had these features and the model said this. And so that starts to build trust. Or, for individual factors in a model, hey, as there's an increase in this variable, there's like a 3x increase in this. Like, just find the ways to talk about it in actual words. And I abstract all of the statistical jargon from my presentations. 100%.
Real quick, I know we're at the end, but I
go for it.
Emphasize that. Like, the reality is presentation should be outcome focused. What is the outcome? Is it information, this and that? For most people, the outcome, they don't need to know the p-values, alpha values, coefficient. They just don't need to. So what you can do is share your presentation out and put it in the appendix. That's another way to do it.
Appendix. Yep, 100%. Thank you so much for joining, Jordan. This was an incredible episode. I feel like we touched on so much and you brought so much information that you shared.
Well, thank you for having me. You can bring me back anytime.
Thank you so much. And thank you everyone for joining. I hope to see you again next week. It's always a pleasure. I hope you found this episode as valuable as I did.
Bye, everyone.